"Well, now," said Vida Runkle, settling her majestic self into one of my two visitor chairs. "Allison tells me you were invaded by a chicken. Don't argue. I'm putting that in my Scene Around Town column." "That's fine," I assured her. Not that Vida ever needed my approval. She'd worked for the newspaper long before I arrived in town. But in the fall, she had finally announced her retirement. Vida had been a staple of the Advocate for over 10 years before I bought the newspaper. Naturally, there were occasional problems about which of us actually ran the show. Now in her late 70s, she was entitled to take her ease, but I'd had trouble imagining the newspaper without her. As it happened, I didn't have to. Vida had retained her right to Scene, with its snippets of Skykomish County residents' daily lives, along with her advice column and an occasional feature about senior citizens. She'd been replaced, not quite the right word, since nobody really could replace her, by Leo's wife, Liza, who had once held a similar job on a Los Angeles area newspaper. In fact, that was how the Walshes had met some 30 years ago. "I'd hoped," Vida went on, "to interview the sheriff's new deputy, since she's female, but my nephew Billy told me Mitch Lasky has already gotten the assignment." Bill Blatt was one of Vida's numerous relatives on her mother's side, and thus duty-bound to tell all to his redoubtable aunt. He was also one of Milo Dodge's deputy sheriffs. I shrugged. County law enforcement is part of Mitch's beat. I could hardly not give him the interview. Vida adjusted the single pheasant feather of her broad-brimmed hat. "I suppose that's so, but I've already met her." "So is Mitch. He introduced himself on her first day of work last Monday." "So did I." Vida's gray eyes were glittering behind her gold-rimmed glasses. "She's rather nice-looking." "Is she? Didn't your husband say so?" "No," I replied. "Milo mentioned that she was qualified and seemed sharp. There were 4 other candidates, but he considered her the one best suited for the job. She'd worked for law enforcement in Tacoma but wanted a change. Having only one female deputy until now, the sheriff felt Doe Jameson had been overworked dealing with abused women, especially during the holidays with so much drinking. Yes, I'm sure she'll find Alpine a wonderful place to live. And work." Vida turned thoughtful. "Consuelo de Groot. What can she be?" "Milo's new deputy?" I smiled when I said it. Vida wasn't amused. I meant her nationality. "She looks French to me, but the name doesn't suit her." "She's probably gotten used to it." "Perhaps." Vida paused, then shrugged her broad shoulders. "I must get to work on Scene." She made her splay-footed way out of my cubbyhole. I returned to my editorial, after my standard and dull hope for everyone in Skyco to have a healthy, happy, prosperous new year. I needed something fresh. What I really wanted was to demand that County Manager Jack Blackwell put streetlights on Fir Street, where the sheriff and I resided in what was now our log cabin, since we'd finally gotten married last spring. I could also push for sidewalks, but knew that'd break the budget, if there was one. But whatever I suggested, Blackwell would dismiss. He and Milo had never gotten along since Jack first came to town 30 years ago, when my future husband was still a deputy. I couldn't stand Jack either. Yet he ran Blackwell Timber as an efficient, safe operation and treated his employees fairly. He had even survived a public tirade against him by a woman who blamed him for her husband's death in an Idaho logging operation. Being our second biggest employer after the community college, I had to tread lightly around Black Jack. Allison brought in the mail a little after 10:30, which was later than usual. "Marlo Whip's limping," she said in a cheery voice. "He was hit by a car." Our regular mailman was a chronic complainer, but this news jarred me a bit. "But he's doing the route? What happened?" "The car had started to back up and only bumped him," she replied. "But you know Marlo. He likes to gripe. I'm surprised he didn't ask the post office to relieve him for the rest of the day." I was too, but before I could say anything, Allison went on. "The new county extension agent is a hottie. He's not married." "So I understand from the news release. Has he asked you out yet?" The cheer faded a bit. "No, but I'll figure out something. Maybe I'll ask him if he could teach me to churn butter." Allison didn't quite dance out of my office, but she came close. By 11 o'clock, I'd finished with the mail. There wasn't anything of interest except for 2 cranks who criticized my editorial, wishing everyone a happy holiday season. One insisted I was a